Have we forgotten how to enjoy Spurs? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today, but also going over where Spurs actually are right now. Is it as bad as the noise makes out? Are things actually a little better? Well, we're going to go into all the real status of everything and kind of come to a conclusion to that question. And we're just going to try and take a pragmatic view that's not too filled with hysteria and extreme takes. So I couldn't think of a better person to go over that with me today than the wonderful ProfSpur. How are you, Aaron?
Hi, I'm well. How are you today?
I'm doing good, thanks. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Good.
Another player going out on loan for Spurs and hopefully some coming in the other direction next week. But yeah, sun is shining. Doing well, thanks.
Absolutely.
And yeah, Aaron, should we start with kind of our observations of where we are in this transfer window, manager transition, and like how that kind of ties into our expectations next season? I think we'll start with the most present topic, and that's the transfer window. It's an interesting one because if you take an objective view of imagining we were just neutral fans who don't follow Tottenham, I'd be going, well, Liverpool are Liverpool. They're in their own kind of stratosphere with Manchester City, and they're running at a canter, bringing in all these brilliant names that are, should we call them the obvious signings, but only a few people are privileged to be in a position where you can take the obvious, because the
Right.
obvious ones are expensive.
Right.
And they can choose where they want to go, and they're going to choose the obvious ones for them, which are the biggest clubs. Then you've kind of got a little bit of a gap, and you kind of got Chelsea and Arsenal. They're doing things. They're balancing out their squads. They've still got gaps, and they're overly inflated in some areas, under in others, trying to fine tune things. But they're making some movement. It's not been perfect. It's been okay. And then you kind of have the Villa, Spurs, Newcastles, who are trying to get into the bracket above. But things are hard this year. And I guess we'll discuss in a minute why we think that is. And then you kind of got clubs who have sold their best players, who are a bit below that, who are now reinvesting that money. And then you've got the teams that come up through relegation, and they're signing easier targets. Players who are going, yeah, I'll go to you because I'll get Premier League football. I'm the top of the Championship. But I'm not good enough for a Spurs or a Liverpool or an Arsenal or whoever, but I'll come on you this journey and see if we can stay in the Premier League. Anyway, so that's my synopsis. What's yours of where we sit in this transfer scenario? What's going on? Because it just feels weird. Like, yeah, there's always different. It feels different this year. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, I think it's really helpful and refreshing to lay it out the way that you did and to provide that context, because I think we all know going into every season that we are not in the area where we're signing Florian Wirtz and both of Jeremy Frimpong and Jerkes, right? We're not shopping in that market exactly, but we are we are making moves. I'm extremely excited about Mohammed Kudus. I've been a huge fan of his for a long time, and I think he brings a couple of things that we don't have. So I think that's a great, exciting signing. And I think Spurs fans would be justified in feeling genuinely excited about bringing him in. We're still doing, I think, some pretty intelligent business within our means in terms of bringing in Takai and young center back. Keep in mind, last season we were down to playing Archie Gray out of position for 20 plus matches precisely because we didn't have center back depth. I'm not even talking necessarily quality of depth, but just an actual professional center back to play center back for large stretches of the season. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I think we're doing smart and also in certain ways exciting business, but we also know that we have some glaring gaps in the squad, and we ran into depth issues last season that nobody wants to repeat. And so it's easy to look at the business that Chelsea are doing, where they're just sort of signing everybody with a pulse. And it's easy to look at Liverpool and the way that they're strengthening, having already won the league title, and just kind of putting that extra, distance on everybody. So, and to look at that and be frustrated totally understandable, but I don't think all is lost. And I think at least we have some clarity of vision, I would expect, in our recruitment about what's needed now, especially with Maddison going down with a long-term injury.
And when you look at, the net spend is always a figure everyone looks at, but I will caveat this with, I think people have the knowledge of our wage to revenue ratio being so, shall we call it healthy? But that, in other words, that's got room to be less healthy, but in the sense that it's because we've got more players on more money that are, of a certain level that make us better. So people are saying, I know it's all well and good for Spurs' EBITDA number and everything else, but I want that number to be stretched because it's a sign that we're, stretching our ability to spend. But when you take all that away for a second, our net spend is still 110 million euros net this summer. Now, inflation, that doesn't buy you it doesn't buy you enough to keep pace with Liverpool. It doesn't buy you enough to keep pace with Man City. It doesn't give you enough to keep pace with Chelsea or even Arsenal at the moment. But it's still quite a lot of money. And I'm just interested because where I'm going with this is previously 100. You said to me, Spurs will spend net 120 million a year every single season. I'll go, you know what? I'll take that. That's enough for Spurs to be competitive, right? And we've done that for 5 or 6 years, but we find ourselves not too competitive with those above us. And I think we often as well, we've overlooked that, Matisse Tell doesn't feel like this season's signing because he was on loan last season. We negotiated down a price. But when we first got him, everyone was so excited. This wonder kid from Bayern Munich with a huge ceiling who had previously looked at Spurs and said, no thanks, I'm bigger than that. And we've ended up with the player, but almost because the player ended up coming around to the idea that maybe he wasn't good as he thought he was and Spurs were about his level, everyone's less excited. And they're like, does that really count? But do you feel then it's always, you touched on it earlier, but it's also knowing that we've got those 3 or 4 gaps to go. And we're probably in a position now, we've brought in Paulinha, where that's one of them, but he's alone. You've still got a couple more, but we probably know that once you've brought in Paulinha, Tell and Kudus, you're probably looking at selling before you can buy now. And the brakes have hit. And then you're looking at Liverpool going, I'll have Isaac and I'll have Ekitike as well, actually. Thank you very much. Right. But when did this start, this comparison to Liverpool? Because I feel like we've never been in that stratosphere. Why suddenly does it feel like, I have it as well, I want to see us competing with them. Do you have the same where you're just kind of like, I do want us to fix all our issues. I know we used to be a club that did 1 or 2 issues a season. I want to see us fix everything and go for it. Has it changed for you as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that. I mean, part of it I just think is to do with your opening question, that it feels like you're in kind of a media and a social media fishbowl with everybody else these days when it comes to especially Premier League fandom. So it can feel like it's very immediate when other people are gapping you or like moving on, and you feel like you're standing still. But I think another piece of it is that, taking Arsenal, for example, I mean, they've had incredible stability and continuity in their manager and in their squad. So their transfer strategy is frankly like simpler than ours because they're just adding pieces. I mean, clearly their strategy is, I think we need a Declan Rice type guy, so we get Declan Rice. And then, I think we need a little bit more up top, and so we make moves there. And they're gradually kind of trying to put that final piece together. I mean, hopefully they will not find the right final piece to kick on from there, but you can see what they're trying to do. We don't have continuity, and this is why I've been banging on about this for years now. It came to a head, I think, with Postecoglou and with our sort of fan base split over him. But for me, it's not even about Postecoglou or Conte or anybody. It's about what happens when you keep changing. And it makes it harder to sort of sort out like what that, to build gradually that squad that can keep up, relatively speaking, despite the deficits and, revenue and spending that we're going to face against certain top clubs. But that's where the frustration comes from for me, is that it feels like we have to start over again every couple of seasons. And then when we do that, psychologically, it feels like, oh, we have 3, 4, 5 pieces before we're even anywhere near the teams we want to be competing with. And then we look at those teams again and think like, well, we should be up there because we've been talking like we should be up there for a long time. We just haven't closed that gap. So that's the frustration for me. It's the process, stopping and starting and stopping and starting.
It's consistency, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's consistently doing the right thing over and over again. It's not suddenly going out and doing everything at once and fixing everything, because we've won a trophy. I think that's a huge leap forward, and then your natural mentality is springboard. I think it's the term that's used quite often. Can we use this as a springboard to drive ourselves forward and accelerate us back to where we were when we felt we were on the right path? And sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I'm glad that you pointed out also some of the recent signings that I overlooked a moment ago. I mean, Tell is a really exciting player. We should be excited about him. He's got that sort of short backlift thing like Harry Kane has. I mean, I'm not trying to oversell that comparison, but like the way that he strikes, I think is like very promising, and he's super talented. And Paulinha, even, I've been on the record saying I'd prefer Basuma. I think all around, for me, that's true. I'm probably in the minority there, but even that signing I'm excited about because I know that he can do a couple of things like really, really well, and it's going to help us and add experience and depth. So we still have reason to be excited about what we have. It's just that psychological gap that we're dealing with every single window at this point.
The transfer window isn't like every club just moves at the same pace. Some clubs address all their problems in the first week. Some do all theirs at the last minute. But you don't know who's had the better window if you just take a flashpoint in time, a snapshot in time, and say, from 2/3 through the window, this club's done brilliantly and this one hasn't. It's more complex than that. And you're also waiting on other clubs to make moves to open doors for you to do certain things. I think what makes it, if you paused at the time we signed Mohammed Kudus and the Gibbs White bid had gone, and you go, Spurs are going to have one exciting season next year. Wow, what momentum.
Right.
And then the thing is, you don't account for is everyone else is still moving too. So then someone else let's just say Newcastle could make an exciting signing tomorrow. And then you go, whoa, that makes me feel less happy and puts a dent in my euphoria of how we were doing, because now I think we've got to do twice as much as we had to do before to keep pace with you. Because we might take 2 steps forward, but the club next to us could take 3.
Yeah.
So it's so hard. All these clubs are equally driving ultimately to overtake each other. And they all want each other's spots. And you're fighting against 20 sets of chairmen who are all millionaires and billionaires, and they're used to winning, and they all want to win. And they all want to be top. And they're going to give everything they can to get it. And some clubs like Spurs have got a 20-year approach to 25 years of ownership, right? Long-term approach. Others are here to turn their club into something else in 2 or 3 years and then sell it, or whatever their ulterior motive is. It's all it's such a complex, competitive world we sit in with it all.
Absolutely.
How do you feel as well about if this is being the kind of the legacy of the previous manager still being present in the new tenure? And by that I mean, I feel like there's a lot of energy of people who would understandably be like, well, I didn't want change, or I did change, and that's going to impact your energy into this new project, because you're naturally going to be quite defensive of the new project if you wanted that change, and you're going to be more critical of it probably if you didn't want that change. And therefore it's kind of like I feel there's naturally going to be some people itching to say I told you so,
right,
on both sides of that camp. And it's now about proving yourself to other Spurs fans why you were right or wrong, rather than let's just try and enjoy Spurs and hope they move forward the past.
Yep. That's the dynamic. Exactly that. And I have to catch myself sometimes letting myself get sucked into that dynamic sometimes, because I didn't want change. But I think an optimistic take on this is that we're continuing the same old debates about the previous manager channeling them through Thomas Frank and through the preseason precisely because there's not much to talk about, of actual consequence in the preseason. And I'm hopeful that once the season starts, we're still going to have arguments and debates. We're still going to have disagreements. But hopefully when the new season starts, we'll be having debates and disagreements about stuff that's actually happening now and actually unfolding, where we don't know the outcome already, and instead of rehashing some of the old debates that we've been having that we're kind of stuck in.
Well, I think we were saying it off air, weren't we? There's already the injury things come up, and it's it's natural to think, well, if this had been under the previous tenureship, the noise would probably be very clear that the reason is because of our tactics, our philosophy, the way we're playing. But it's happened without that. So it goes to show, I think you could take positives from this and go, well, it now highlights that it's more than that. And that gives an opportunity to learn that there's other areas maybe we should be pointing our energy to ask questions of why and what can we do about it. And one of those is back to the squad depth, which we've touched on transfers, but I think it's important. There's other clubs like Villa and Newcastle who have got European football to manage, and Nottingham Forest, who are also really struggling to get players over the line. And it's interesting. What's your thoughts on why is it so hard for Spurs, Villa, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, who've got European football? They're fine. They're not Liverpool. We're not City, but we're still big football clubs who could offer players big pay rises and offer good fees. But we can't seem to bolster our squad depth up this year. It's weird.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I wish I had a kind of a reliable answer, or an answer that I would really back, but it's a tricky situation. I mean, maybe it's a little bit different for each club and for each situation. I mean, for Spurs, I think one of the things that we have going on is we have, especially with the new manager, in not a clear sense of where everybody stands with him and where everybody is going to fit in. And we have a lot of talented young players. And so I could see somebody thinking, okay, Spurs likely to have a lot of games in Champions League, but there's also going to be a lot of competition in different areas and a lot of hungry young players who are going to want those minutes. In the case of Villa, I think we're at 95% of our revenue and wage bills. So what can we do? Maybe Newcastle is kind of in some PSR inhibited territory, but also it's a huge blow for them just to hear that Isak wants to go. So if you're thinking maybe I go to Newcastle, well, why is their star player trying to jump ship? And so do I trust that? And then finally, are people going to believe that Forest can repeat what they did last year? They overperformed in a lot of ways. Are people going to believe that we can kick on from a 17th place league finish last year? Are they afraid that, they might be courting disaster if they come to Spurs? I mean, I don't believe these things, but I think I can understand why players would look at it and at the situation and be a little bit cautious.
Yeah, it's interesting that you see a lot of those clubs saying, PSR is the reason we can't do this. But when you look under the hood, PSR isn't what's causing Newcastle to need to sell Isak. It's once again, it feels like there's I call them, the big six has always been out to be a thing, which I think is out of date now because it's more of a 7 large clubs now and others that are rising back up to knock on the door. But also because I think Liverpool and City are just in their own ballpark they've got the resources. Even City, I know people say they're a modern club. When you look at the amount of trophies they've got, they do have a history. I know it's a more recent history, but it's a massive history now. And to catch up with those would take a decade of dominant football to even start becoming in a conversation with those clubs. They're just so far ahead of everyone else. Even Chelsea are behind them when you look at what they have won, Premier League-wise. They haven't won nearly a fraction of the number of titles of those guys in the last 10, 15 years. So then there's the Chelsea, I think, in third. And there's Arsenal, but Arsenal miles off City and Liverpool still.
Right.
They've come those second place league finishes, but you know what I mean? The whole dynamic of it saying these 6 clubs just miles ahead of everyone else has changed. And you can just see that everyone holding out for these massive clubs, saying, if I want to win trophies, ideally I want to be at one of those 2 now. It's not 6. I want to be at Liverpool, City in England. I want to be in Real Madrid in Spain. I want to be at PSG in France. And those clubs are widening the gap. Our revenues are growing, but their revenues are growing even faster. And we zig, they zag. When that's right. So we're always kind of trying to catch up. And I think that's why the Europa League was such a nice competition to be in. It's like, it's not a small cup, but it's a cup that you're not competing against super clubs who have double your revenue. You're in amongst clubs more of a similar orientation to yours, and it just feels fairer to be in a competition. But then equally, other clubs look at us in there and go, this is so unfair. There's a Premier League club in there with 500 million in revenue and we got 200. What's going on? They can bring on Kulusevski off the bench, who'd be our best player. This isn't fair. Yeah. But hey, take what you can get.
Yeah. Right, so it's a funny dynamic, isn't it? Because we, on the one hand, we're the bullies or can be cast that way. And on the other, like you said, there's a huge gap between like your Liverpool and your Manchester City and where Spurs are, Villa are, Newcastle are. But we also get it from the other end because there's so much compression in the Premier League now where, there's close, fierce competition kind of in the middle of the table. And I think, sadly, we've fallen a little bit back into that. Like we've been pulled back into that level of competition in recent years and haven't really been able to press the advantage that we maybe forged for most of the past decade. And so it's really fierce, but even though we're getting pulled back in and there's more parity and more compression, more competition in the league, we're still being painted by teams historically kind of below us in the table as big 6, Sky 6 bullies. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't for Spurs right now, because you're just in that zone where everybody either look up at you with scorn or down at you with contempt, and it's just where we live for the moment. But I take some energy from that, and I assume that that the club and players also do too. There's something in having a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and I honestly believe that the squad mobilized that a lot in the Europa League competition last season, and that was a big part of why we had this all together messaging.
That was noticeable, wasn't it? It was the different managers have different styles of getting it, but it felt like Jose had a similar thing of like, them lot outside the window, anyone out there, they hate you. They don't want you to have this. They don't believe you can have this. They keep saying you suck. They don't believe in you. But there's a few people that do. I'm one of them. The people in this room are the others. Mm-hmm. And it's those family members, your wives, your kids. This is our group, right? And we're out there to show the world they didn't believe us, but we could. And there was that kind of culture that I know we spoke about the Europa League before many times across, numerous channels saying, Spurs were always one of the favourites for that competition. Well, I've seen Spurs go out against Mura, Middlesbrough, Colchester.
Right.
Endless teams that we were favourites, but we never, and we always said it's the mentality of the club. So it was nice to see the mentality of a team change. And I don't know what Frank's approach is. We'll find out over the next year, but hopefully it's one that can see us remain competitive in cups and competitions. But I think in the same way, going back to the original point, it's kind of like I look at Nottingham Forest and I'm not worried about them. Mm-hmm. I go, yeah, they've had a good season. They stopped us getting Gibbs White, but to truly take over Spurs, they need to do this for like 5+ seasons in a row.
Right.
And there's too much variables in football, European football. In the same way, I think Liverpool and City look at likes of Spurs and go, no chance. You'll need to do that every year after year and year to get closer to us. So we've got to accept that, when we've got the advantage in some places, we've got the disadvantage in other. And to bridge that gap isn't quite as simple as knocking on the door to Real Madrid and going, Rodrigo, you sure you want him?
Right.
The player's going to be like, Tottenham what?
Yeah, where's that?
Unfortunately, that's just... So we've got to be smarter. and I think this is where we're going to lead into, is you did a great article on your Substack on expectations for, the coming season. Where are you at the moment in terms of, your expectations? What's a healthy season? What stops you losing your mind and enjoying Spurs versus, the dream? I'm sure there's different perimeters you've got in your
Yeah.
mind. Yeah.
I mean, so one thing, it could end up being just a little too cute, or a little too nice, but I try to distinguish between predictions and expectations. I feel like expectations are not just what you don't stake your expectations only on reality. In a sense, you have to stake your expectations a little bit on some optimism or some idealism, or if your temperament swings the other way, then some pessimism. But I think that it's healthy for at least myself and in general for fans to aim high with our expectations for this club, because I don't think I can hear like Newcastle and Villa fans and Forest fans in the background listening to this. They probably won't, but if they do, thinking this is arrogant of me to say, but I don't think 17th is really kind of our natural position. Like, I don't think we're the 17th best team in the Premier League. I think that last year was an outlier for a lot of different reasons that we don't need to rehash. And I've gone over what I think about that many, many times. But I don't think that just because we had a poor league season to favor a Europa competition, that therefore we need to go into this season thinking that should be our baseline, better than 17th. Like, in my mind, we're still competing for European places, and it's still realistic to have a shot at top 4 or 5 if we do the right things in the remainder of the transfer window and other things fall in place besides. I think that's what our outlook should be, because that's where we've been for the most part in our recent history, and we shouldn't let a blip of an outlier season take us too far away from thinking of ourselves as capable of reaching those heights.
I completely agree. And 5th is potentially a Champions League spot as well, right? And you're aside from we'll call them the super clubs that we mentioned earlier. Why can't Spurs just jump back up to those? It could easily happen where we're suddenly, the players we have are good enough to suddenly elevate Spurs to go, all right, actually Spurs are in a fight for 4th or 5th this year. Villa haven't shot ahead further from us. They brought in one centre forward and then a €7 million centre back. They're struggling to bring players in, and they've lost a lot of players on loan that were key to their depth last season. Asensio and Rashford being two. That they're now going to have to bolster their squad further. Another season in Europe. And it's the same for Forest. They've gone up into a bigger European competition in the Europa League, and they're going to need a much deeper squad. That they're going to be stretched a lot, and it's a big ask for them to be able to maintain that league form. On top of that, we know how tough it is. Spurs have experience at doing this.
Right.
We've got a bigger squad that we look at our squad and go, we could do with upgrading Ben Davies there and having another left centre back that's a higher quality. We could do with an extra wing back. Only having 3.5 isn't ideal. You need 4 or 5. These clubs are that level of problems times 5. And they're going, eek, we can only spend half what Spurs can spend. And we've got to fix more problems than Spurs have got to fix. So I think we are bridging the gap on those clubs that overtook us in the short term. There's reasons, but then there's equally, I don't think it's a disaster if Spurs go, they end up coming in the top half, but not what we want in the top half.
Right.
I don't think that means you pull the plug on Thomas Frank and go, next, let's start another project again. Like you said at the start, consistency is everything.
Yeah.
And consistent recruitment, that's good, will set a consistent manager up for success over time. But you've got to let those managers have the time to be consistent, don't you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's going to be variation in, whatever expectation you set. There's going to be a high bound and a low bound for that, roughly speaking. And as long as we're in that range, I think we will have met at least my expectations. Um, and yeah, I do think that we should be, like you said, we do have a pretty strong squad relative to some of the competition for those European places. Last season we played 60 games, and I think Van de Ven played 22 or 24 of them, and Romero played 26 or 27 of them, or something like that. Find me one other Premier League team that's had that type of situation. I could be, maybe I eat my words and there's one out there and I don't know, but I don't think Liverpool were in a situation last season where they were playing Harvey Elliott at center back. So a lot, if we just can stay healthy, I think, and have a little bit of good fortune in that area. I know it hasn't been a great start to that so far this preseason, but if we can maintain some stability in that way, I think our squad looks massively better. We're just talking about night and day. And I saw it, you probably saw too, the Opta, they call it supercomputer, which I think is kind of funny.
Especially if you have a rough idea of how
right.
that works. It's as if there's some room with an enormous computer. In reality, it's an application probably running on just a standard MacBook. They press spacebar and they go, run it.
I was going to say, I'm not an expert, but my guess is the compute for that is probably not greater than like my MacBook Air could probably do it.
Exactly.
But yeah, that you probably saw that, and I think they had us finishing 14th this season, but that data is just based on probably heavily weighted toward last season's league performance, which is not everything that you would want predictably, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, we don't have to. I think we're a little bit better than that, and a little bit of run of luck with player health and fitness will make things look massively different.
Yeah. Well, and if you're a betting man, you would say, you offered me 50 quid and said, I bet you 50 quid Spurs won't sign anyone this window more. I'd bite your hand off for it, because I'd be sure as hell that we're going to sign at least one or two more players.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just that lift that's needed. When we beat Arsenal in the friendly, it was, you're hearing talk of maybe we are ready to be back in that top four. Maybe we are a lot better than I thought. Wow, Frank's got good tactical nous, doesn't he? Pape Matar. Who needs James Maddison when you got him at 10? All that kind of stuff starts, and it gets a bit, it gets a bit silly at times. That's the whole point of football. You get a bit carried away and optimistic, and your hopes and dreams are crushed 1 week later because you overreact to a moment defined in the space of a minute, and then you kind of say, well, that defines our level now. So the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, where Spurs are nowhere near as bad as 17th, and we've got a bit of work to do. We want to be staying in that top 4 or 5 places, but it's achievable. Mm-hmm. So let's see what happens over the next few weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that was it, really. It was just good to catch up. Aaron, and if you want to check out Aaron's Substack, it's brilliant. I'm sure you've probably seen ProfSpur on. He's not on X anymore, but you're on Blue Sky now, right? And right. Just search it on Substack, I assume, and you'll just ProfSpur and it'll come up. I've signed up, so encourage anyone to, if they enjoy a bit of a read and something that's based on a nice mix of sensible opinions but well-researched data. So yeah, it's really good. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure, as always, chatting with you about this. And it's funny because for much of the year, where I live, there are not a ton of football fans. I mean, I text with people and stuff like that, but there's not a ton of people. So it's actually great to have a live conversation with somebody about Spurs and about the sport, because I don't always get that. So a real pleasure for me. Thank you for having me on.
No, we'll do many more in the season ahead, hopefully. And Deej mentions this as well, especially the time zone difference you have.
Right.
It's like I'm ranting about it on the way out the stadium, in the car. Then I get home and my WhatsApp's all kicked off. My mates are ripping on me. I'm ranting about it there. Then I go to bed. But Deej is like, for me, this game happens, and then you're like off to bed, and I'm like looking around my room, talking with my dog about it. Like, can someone talk to me about this? Or
exactly.
It's different, and it's nice to always talk about it with people around the world as well, who get who get a different take on it, which is interesting because I think when you're in the stadium, it's you're influenced by those who sit in the couple of seats around you, and you get in the car or you get to chat to someone like yourself and you go, oh, actually, yeah, you actually noticed a lot of things I didn't in that match that are really, really insightful. So, yeah, that's always good. All right, well, up the Spurs. Hopefully this video is out of date by the time it hits everyone's, whatever you're listening to it on, because we've signed someone else. There you go. Up the Spurs.
Let's hope for it.